Hi everybody, I am Seunghye Sun, the director of Korean Culture Center. Today, we are going to share our ideas about Korean studies here and Korean history studies here, and also the recent Nobel Prize of Hangang. It is my great honor to have Professor Anders Karlsson of SOAS for discussing about Korean studies and Korean history in the United Kingdom. 교수님 안녕하세요.
네, 안녕하세요.
Thank you so much for coming to our dialogue program.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here. So my name is Anders Karlsson, and I'm a senior lecturer or associate professor in Korean studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies, where I work on Korean history, but also teach in general about Korean culture and society, and also some Korean language as well.
How long did you teach here in SOAS?
So I came in the autumn of 2000, so for 24 years.
Wow,
I've
24
been here
years,
now, yes.
yeah.
I moved from Sweden and I came here.
From Sweden to
Yes,
here.
yes.
And then just you start teaching Korean history here for more than 20 years.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So today I want to have a kind of share our conversations about 5 key topics and for our discussions. My first question is history of Korean studies in the United Kingdom.
So in the United Kingdom, like in many other European countries, I think Korean studies comes out of an academic tradition that focused a lot on philology, on language. So in the beginning, a lot of the focus for Korean studies would have been on language, also on older forms of language as well. And then the earliest disciplines would be using that language, it would be using your knowledge of both contemporary Korean language, but also older languages, to look at history, to look at literature. So Bill Skilland, the first professor at SOAS, as he worked on classical Korean literature. So that's the beginning where it started from. But of course, over the years, it has expanded a lot. Many other disciplines that we can see as well. And of course, the last 10 to 15 years, a really kind of explosion and a lot of interest in more screen culture, popular culture, bringing in more kind of cultural studies, maybe social sciences into those kind of interests as well.
As I said, it is quite exciting. Just the first in Korean language, and then Korean classical languages, and then now you mentioned about 15 years ago and 16 years ago, those Korean studies and kind of expand to some kind of areas of films and social and political studies. And do you feel any kind of special turning point and any reasons? And those Korean studies are kind of expand in the areas in interest in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, I think these kind of developments started before what we call the Korean wave. And I think it's in general, Korean film started to become more known, well known in various festivals. And then later on, of course, we do have the development of the internet, and many people have more easily access to things Korean, and they start to get interested. They can go beyond the kind of traditional media and find things, and just find things on the internet and find it interesting, Korean material, and they want to know more about Korea. So I think it's just the bigger picture of Korean culture and then Korea in general becoming more well-known around the world.
There is any change of the students' numbers of undergraduate and MA and PhDs at your school?
Yeah, so we've had a huge increase in the number of students, in particular on our BA degrees, so BA Korean. So when I started, it might be maybe 5 new students every year. Now we should say maybe around 50 students. Yes. So that's a huge increase. We do have a lot of PhD students as well coming to work with us. And once again, on a wide range of subject that they're interested in.
Yeah, it is a kind of 5 students to 50 students.
Yes, for an undergraduate program. It's quite remarkable.
It is really remarkable.
Yeah.
And there is I have 2 questions pop up in my mind. The first question is, your research topic has any change when you start teaching here? And then I also want to know what kind of topics then do the students have interest in their
Yeah.
kind of research?
Okay, so for me, historians have a tendency to go further back and further back in history. So for me, I did my PhD dissertation on the Hongyeong. So it's basically the early 19th century social history. I was interested in living conditions in the countryside, the kind of relationship between central power and the provincial areas. And then I have been slowly moving further back into histories, into the Cheongjo period, into the Yeongjo period. And I'm still very much interested in the relationship between the state and the people, and how kind of state policies would affect the population in general. So I've been looking a lot into agricultural situation, looking into crop failure and famine in the countryside, something that becomes a prominent problem when we do get into this period. So what did the state do? What kind of policies did the state provide? How did they help people in times of famines? And also in terms of other disasters. We could also see more frequent floodings from the late 18th century onwards. So once again, what did the state do? How did they help people? How did they try to prevent these things? So I'm moving slightly backward in time and slightly changing topic, but it's still the same kind of areas that I'm interested in. And I'm also done a lot of work on more legal history.
Legal history.
Legal history as well. So once again, it's very much the relationship between the state and the people. So how did the state try to maintain social order, social control, and what were the kind of limits in terms of what they could do, but also how did people react to what the state did in terms, as I said, of trying to keep social order.
It is quite an important topic, the relationships between our kind of state and people.
Yeah.
I think just you mentioned your history studies just go back to past, but that topic is still and
Yeah.
is very live in Korean society.
Yes.
And could you please say what is the kind of Korean style of relationships in between state and people? If you compare other kind of China, Japan, or other European countries?
I do think that in the Korean case, and I do think that is a tradition going back into Joseon period, we have that kind of public discussion going on very much. A lot of people are engaged in political issues. And of course, if we go back to the Joseon period, we can see that as well. So we do have many intellectuals. They might have positions in the bureaucracy, but as independent intellectuals, they would also discuss these kind of matters. So I think just the constant presence of a lot of discussion about social issues, a lot of discussions about political issues. I think you could see that as some kind of tradition. I said, yes, as an historian, I tend to go back in time, not up in time to the modern times. But yeah, that would be my view. And you also asked about our PhD students. So overall, I would say in our school, and I think that would be the same in many universities, there has been this shift towards more modern, more contemporary topics that students are interested in. I still do get students that are interested in the Joseon period. They want to look at more traditional topics. And it could be many of them are interested in intellectual history, religion around that time, how Confucianism worked, but also social issues. I have students who worked on the Nobi system a little bit. I have one student now working on Yeolyo, the virtuous women. Another student just started and she works on the 19세기 수렴 정정. So those kind of issues as well. So many students, it's not so much the kind of traditional political history, that they're rather looking at more kind of gender issues or these kind of more social issues in their research. And that's for me. And then we have, of course, other colleagues at SOAS have students that work on modern Korean history, working on North Korea, working on Korean art history. It's a wide range of topics.
Yeah, it is quite impressive because you mentioned and your research topic is you mentioned public discussion. and Korean intellectual, a kind of some reaction or discuss. I think it is quite similar in these days. Our kind of public discussions and go to the internet. And many people kind of express their kind of opinions through the kind of SNS and many things. And many Korean intellectuals express in their own ideas. And then just your students, like, wow, 열려, and 수렴청정. I think it is one of the very have the depth of the understand Korean tradition. And so you lead and very important an aspect of Korean understanding Korea here in UK. As you might know, my kind of undergraduate specialty and major was aesthetics. Still I have my kind of lifelong interest is aesthetic, Korean aesthetic. And when you teach, when you kind of research in Korean history, can you apply the terms of some Korean beauty of Korean culture in Korean history?
Yes. So I think there's a growing recognition that, as I said before, this kind of more traditional, chronological, political history isn't that engaging for students. So for the last couple of years or longer than that, for me and other people teaching about Korean history, just trying to find different prisms, aspects to look at Korean history from. So having more kind of thematic approach rather than kind of chronological, political, historical approach to it. So for me, or for others, might be looking at gender as a prism through which to look at history, might look at the body, environment, space, all of these various kind of themes that you can look at. And of course, aesthetics and beauty could be one of those prisms through which you can look at history beyond art history, because you can bring in a lot of other areas into that as well. And just looking at the sensibilities of writers. I mean, you could argue for the kind of sensibilities in terms of philosophy, the beauty of certain philosophical ideas could be possible as well. So I do think that would be an interesting, I haven't done it yet, but an interesting kind of angle and prism, another theme to look at history from.
Yeah, because in these days, K-pop and a kind of Hallyu is it really attract and just global audience. I think that is the one a kind of aesthetics. K-beauty is there, a kind of some beautiful woman, of course, but sometimes inner beauty and some mind, or sometimes a kind of very fashionable things, or singing or dance. And then sometimes very struggling and just painful history, but we can overcome, just the Korean people, and overcome some difficulties. We feel some of the kind of human, the beauty of just our lives. And so it is but I am quite happy, and you told me, and beauty is one of the theme, very important theme to research in Korean history.
I do think so. I mean, as long as we don't reify it and define, so this is Korean beauty, but just see that as an opening point into look at various aspects of history. I think that can be very fruitful. Yes.
Korean Culture Center invite you, and we open a new program, Unlock Korean History, K History Special.
Yes.
So what is your perspective on Korean history through Korean literature, film, and dramas?
Yes. I think that, once again, dramas or films or screen culture in general has the ability to engage people. So they start to get interested by watching that, and they want to know more. So once again, it's opening up that kind of interest. And there are a lot of good films, a lot of good dramas that are, from an historian's point of view, quite solid. And it doesn't matter if it's slightly fictional, as long as it's not fantasy. But then I think it's very useful to use that in terms of teaching. And a lot of these films or dramas, of course, they do a lot of research into it. So you have all of this kind of content, and you can zoom in on, you can focus on certain aspects of Korean society, of Korean culture, a lot of various aspects you can just draw out of this. So that's what I'm trying to do. So when here at the cultural center, I chose the film Sado, about Sado Seja. And once again, there's so much interesting you can talk about. So I spent one of the lectures just talking about the background and then what's going on at court, bringing in the kind of politics and just trying to understand. So Yeongjo, why in the end did he have to do what he did? And then in the second lecture, just bringing out cultural and social themes that you could see in it, and the role of education, in particular the role of education of the crown prince would be important, just Confucianism and what that meant for being a king, being a sagacious Confucian king. Sado Seja got interested in Taoism and then shamanism, so just looking at those kind of other religions that in a sense had a kind of slightly conflictual relationship with the dominant Confucian ideology. And we have all of these very important women at court as well. So just understanding what were the role of women in the Joseon court. So a lot of interesting kind of themes that you could look in by using one film only. And there are a lot of interesting films or dramas that you could use. Dramas are more difficult because of the length of them. It's easier with the film.
And then I just in Yeongjo, Jeongjo is one of the very important in period because and there are many stories about the King Yeongjo and Sado Seja and Jeongjo, but Jeongjo developed the Gyujangak. So he is one of the king who strongly believe the power of intellectual ones. And I know just he has a lot of interest and just about a kind of recent, at the time, very contemporary new and science informations from Europe and from many other places.
Yes. For me, as I said in the beginning, my research interest is really into the relationship between the state and the people. Of course, that would be also with the king and the people, and both Yeongjo and Jeongjo are famous for how they try to reformulate the position of the relationship between the king and the people. And those kind of areas that I'm interested in, so the legal system, and Yeongjo is famous for prohibiting various forms of torture and other forms of legal reforms that we can see as well. Or in terms of famine relief, that system became much more elaborate during the Jeongjo reign. And he introduced really interesting policies for orphans as well, King Jeongjo. So those kind of research issues that I'm interested in. It's really interesting to look at both Yeongjo and Jeongjo. And also trying to explain them from a more kind of political historical background as well, why these kings had this attitude, why they wanted to, as I said, reformulate the relationship between the king and the people.
But personally, in Jeongjo is a very struggling from his own life because the father and mothers and the grandfather. How do you kind of in the history always sometimes history is very state and people, but sometimes the history is very personal story. So how can you interpret in Jeongjo's time and from his personal and life point of life?
I mean, so the film Sado, I mean, it follows very much Han Jung-nok, so the memoirs of Haegyang Hongshi. And in that we do get the very personal story. Of course, focusing mainly on Sado Seja, but we do get an understanding of the personal story of Jeongjo as well. So I actually think the film does that very well. So you get that very personal story from the film. And in my lectures, then I just try to provide a bigger picture, understanding why we had this personal tragic drama developing at that time.
Han Jung-nok is one of the most very sad but very beautiful and text written by a kind of woman writer.
Yes.
And could you please tell me more about your kind of impression or your ideas or your opinion about Han Jung-nok?
Han Jung-nok? So I mean, I did my degrees in Korean studies at Stockholm University, and of course there as well there was this focus on the language. We don't only study contemporary Korean, but also looking at Joseon period Korean, etc., etc. So I first looked at Hanjung-nok from that point of view. So we
Wow.
went into the
Oh.
original text and trying to understand just the kind of linguistics behind it. So quite an in-depth research into it. But at the same time, just getting fascinated by the story we have it. It's not only about Sado Seja, it's about Haegyong Hongxi as well.
Yeah.
As a young girl, being married into the royal family, having to adjust to those kind of conditions. And of course, later on as well, with the death of Cheongjo and her kind of emotions surrounding that. So there's a lot of emotional content. It's a fascinating piece of work. And for a bigger audience, of course, fortunately, we have that in a very good English translation as well. It's not only modern Korean translations, but also English translation.
And on that day, how was the kind of audience reaction about your
Yeah.
talk and about the Sado Seja film?
Of course, they had questions about how could this happen. It is kind of extraordinary for a king to ask his son to step into a rice chest and locking the rice chest. And I've tried to explain, of course, why Yeongjo felt that need, but they were just interested in why specifically that. And they're just trying to once again explain it from a kind of legal historical point of view. What kind of options would they have or Yeongjo have to deal with the situation? Trying to explain it that way. But then a lot of questions just in general about that period, about Korean history. And that is a fascinating part of the Korean wave or Hallyu, is that young people, they get interested in Korean pop music. But then they develop all these other kind of interests as well. So it seemed from some of the questions that these students, young people, were quite knowledgeable of various parts of Korean history, because they go by themselves, they go onto the internet and they find things. So they wanted just me to develop further about a lot of different aspects of Korean history. And so we had a long and interesting kind of discussion afterwards.
Yeah, and this after I arrive in London, I feel many K-pop fans and have interest in Korean history and Korean literature and just in many other and Korean cultures. So I think it is right time to share our ideas.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I always make that argument as well. So we should provide for these young people that are interested in Korea all these different aspects of Korea. So it might be, yes, that they get to Korea through popular culture, be that music, dramas, or webtoons and these kind of areas. But we should, in terms of what we provide as scholars from Korean studies point of view, provide much a broader palette, a lot of things that they could get more information from. So we shouldn't focus on those areas that their initial interest is in, but rather help them to develop broader and deeper interest and understanding.
And when I just think about Joseon period, I often just in my mind the Sejong period is pop up in my mind,
Yes.
and the second period is Yeongjo and Jeongjo. And when I think about the Sejong, Sejong is the Renaissance, 15th century, and just invented Korean Hangul.
Yes.
And Yeongjo, Jeongjo has more a kind of an enlightenment age. Yeah. So there is something different aspect. One thing, just Sejong is the Renaissance period, and Yeongjo, Jeongjo is more like enlightenment age. So do you have any kind of just plan to go to Sejong period with the films and?
I'd be very happy. I must admit that off the top of my head, I'm not sure which film I would use for the Sejong period, but there are a lot of interesting things to talk about on Sejong. I mean, we're talking about very different societies. Once again, 15th century Korea and 18th century Korea. So once again, that opens up for a lot of interesting discussions as well, not only on Sejong and his policies, but once again, society and the relationship and what was going on in Korea at that time. Yeah, so I'd be very happy to talk about the Sejong period
Sejong
as well. In my own research, a little bit about his ideas about legal system, as well. So he was also quite critical of torture. And during his reign, there was a lot of discussions on how to deal with theft and robbery. That is really, really interesting. So I've done a little bit of research, but not so much.
And now, just the students, you mentioned the students access information and materials of research through the internet and data. And would you please kind of introduce and show us a kind of library and some materials, and just if anyone have interested to learn more about Korea and here in London?
Yeah, I mean, SOAS library is the biggest collection in the UK of Korea-related material, and we've been collecting material for a very long time. And it's an open, so it's a national research library, so anybody could go there and access the material. And our website is very good, so you can easily find information about those kind of materials that we do have. So I certainly recommend people to have a look if they're interested. It's easily accessible, and whatever kind of niche interest you might have, you can find them. And we do have like North Korean texts from North Korea, and like old Korean novels, and all various kind of. And we do have a little bit in our old collection as well, a little bit of Korea-related material, which of course is more difficult to access, but if you're interested, it's possible as well. Yeah.
Oh wow! It's just I wanted to go there and study more
Please
about.
come.
And also I know just in SOAS has a Korean Studies Center.
Yes. So the way we teach and do research about Korea at SOAS is that on the one hand we have a department where we do focus on the language teaching, but then also other aspects of Korea that are taught, mainly history and literature. But then also in other departments we have colleagues who work on Korea as well. Art history, politics, a little bit of music. So what we have, the Center of Korean Studies, that's for everybody at SOAS to do something with Korea. So the center does not have the teaching, it's more research-based, and there's kind of space for everybody with an interest in Korea to share information. And we arrange seminars and conferences that are open to the public as well. So we are the kind of window as well towards the surrounding society, the center. So then,
Wow. Now, just if anyone have interest in Korea and just want to know more about in Korea, and go to library as well, and then attend some lectures.
And please do get on the mailing list for the Center of Korean Studies. You get information about these open events that we have in conferences and lectures on various aspects of Korea.
Yeah, it is good information. Now it is we can say this 21st century is the age of digital age. Would you please tell a kind of some one words how the next generation develop their interest in about Korea, or just developed a kind of passion about Korean studies?
So the internet, I think that's a kind of double-edged sword. There's so much information out there, it's so much easier to find information. But at the same time, there's a lot of information that is not so reliable out there as well. So that's an important message that we keep telling our students. Yes, please do go out on the internet, but have a look, okay, so what is the source? Who is telling you this information? That is very, very important. I think Korean institutions have done a very good job in making things available online. The kind of digitalization projects that we can see from Kyujangak or all these kind of various other institutions. It's really helping people to go and find source material. A lot of it might be translated as well into the modern time Korean. So that makes it much easier. And as I said, for us, I think we have an important role in guiding then the students to make sure that they go to the right sites to find that information. And it is really encouraging that it becomes so much easier if I compare when I started to do my PhD research, and you have to go to the libraries and you have to find the books and you make the paper photocopies and everything. But these days, so much is available online.
Yeah, it is quite good point. What is the kind of good information or where from? This information comes from where?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at Korean history, there wouldn't be that much disinformation, but it's, just about how reliable is that information that you're getting.
Yeah, I think it is one of the very important key in when we research in Korean studies in 21st century.
Yeah.
오늘은 특별한 세션을 준비했습니다. 2024년 한강 작가가 노벨 문학상을 받았습니다. 노벨 문학상을 받을 때 스웨덴어로 번역하신 번역가 박옥경 선생님과 또 같이 공역을 하신 앤더슨 칼슨 교수님과 함께 한강의 노벨상 수상 그리고 두 분이 어떻게 번역을 하시게 됐는지 그다음에 어떤 또 소감이신지를 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 안녕하세요. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 저는 30여 년간 한국 소설을 스웨덴어로 번역해온 번역가 박옥경이라고 합니다.
스웨덴어로 그 한강의 소설 중에서 작별하지 않는다와 흰을 두 분이 같이 번역하셨다고 들었습니다.
네.
노벨상을 받게 돼서 또 특히 노벨상이 스웨덴 할리먼에서 만든 상이라 더 기쁘실 거라고 생각을 하는데요. 그 소감을 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
사실 그동안 그 몇 년간 한강 작가에 대한 스웨덴 반응이 너무 좋았어가지고 뭐 곧 받으실 수 있겠다 이런 느낌은 강하게 있었고요. 스웨덴 내에서도 노벨 문학상 수상자 후보로 자주 거론되는 그 유명한 작가 이런 식으로 한강 선생님 항상 소개하는 그런 신문 기사나 아니면 라디오 방송 예고나 그런 것들이 많이 보여줬었기 때문에 언젠가는 꼭 받으시리라 하는 생각이 들었어요. 한국에서 이제 노벨상 문학상 수상자가 나온다면은 한강 선생님이 가장 강력한 후보일 것 같다는 생각을 했는데 이렇게 빨리 받으실 줄은 정말 몰랐기 때문에 너무 깜짝 놀랐고 또 그동안 노벨상 받는 한국 작가가 한 분이라도 나오면 참 좋겠다. 물론 저희는 꼭 노벨상을 받아야 꼭 훌륭한 작가라는 건 아니라고 생각해요. 왜냐하면 뭐 그 받지 못해도 정말 훌륭한 그 소설가이고 작가들이 많거든요. 그런데 어쨌든 노벨상이라는 상을 받으면 아무래도 전 세계의 인지도가 확 달라지기 때문에 앞으로 이제 한국 소설이나 문학이 세계의 독자들을 만나는 기회가 훨씬 많아지겠다. 이런 점에서 너무너무 기뻤고 며칠 동안 잠도 제대로 못 잘 만큼 진짜 설레고 너무너무 좋았어요.
Just to add to that, so our translation of Chakbraja Anandas, it came out in the beginning of beginning of March this year. And the reception was very good for that. A lot of good reviews in newspapers, etc. And Hangang, she came to Sweden for events in the middle of March. And just looking at the reaction, all of the people that came to her book talks. In Stockholm, there was one book talk with 500 people. Further up in the north, in a town called Umeå, 1,000 people came to hear her talk about her books, and they queued for an hour to get the signature from her. So we felt that, so there is something special in Sweden and the kind of interest in Hangang.
그리고 작년에 그 왕립 스웨덴 극장에서 한강 선생님의 채식주의자가 연극으로도 이미 올려져서 이제 일반 그 관객들을 만났었거든요. 그러니까 여러 가지 분위기상 굉장히 분위기 참 좋다라는 생각을 했어요. 그리고 작별하지 않는다에 대한 문학의 비평이나 독자들이 특히 작별하지 않는다 참 많이 좋아하는데 이유는 뭔가 한강 선생의 그 작품 세계를 가장 잘 표현해낸 작품이 아닐까 이런 평가를 많이 받았거든요.
어떻게 해서 두 분이 같이 번역을 하시게 되셨을까요?
제가 1993년에 스웨덴에 유학을 갔어요. 그러니까 한국 외국어 대학교 스웨덴어과를 졸업하고 스웨덴의 스톡홀름 대학교에 이제 유학을 갔는데 아니 그 서점이나 이런 데 가보면 중국 번역 소설이나 아니면 일본 번역 소설들은 꽤 많이 이렇게 보여지는데 한국 소설은 하나도 없는 거예요. 그래서 그때 당시 이제 참 아쉽다. 그리고 우리나라 소설가들의 아니면 시인들의 작품들이 참 좋은데 번역된 문학이 하나도 없다는 것에 좀 너무 아쉽고 안타까운 생각이 들었던 차에 사실 이제 스톡홀름 대학교 한국학과가 있는데 한국학과에 다니는 그 학생들하고 교류가 좀 있었어요. 제가 한국인이다 보니까. 근데 이제 그 중에 칼슨 교수가 있었는데 이제 칼슨 교수도 문학에 되게 관심이 많았고 혼자서 조금 이렇게 번역도 시작해보고 그랬던 것 같아요. 그래서 그러면 우리 같이 번역을 한번 해보자. 이렇게 하면서 처음 이제 번역을 시작했는데 이제 오랫동안 번역하면서 이제 점점 가까워지고 그래서 지금은 부부로 같이 공동 번역을 하고 있어요. 그리고 사실 너무너무 더 이번에 노벨상 수상이 기뻤던 것은 초창기 그 열악했던 상황이 떠올라가지고 그때는 이제 저희가 번역 원고를 어느 정도 해가지고 출판사에 이렇게 보내봐도 그 출판사에서 원고 내용은 참 좋은데 확답을 못 주겠다 출판하는 것은 그런 상황이 많았어요. 그러던 차에 그 이제 대형 출판사들의 어떤 관계자 중에 한 분이 좀 출판사가 작긴 해도 그 출판계나 문학계에는 꽤 인지도가 있는 출판사가 있는데 그 출판사 한번 관계자 만나보고 어차피 서구 유럽이나 아니면 미국 작가들 외에 다른 나라 작가들의 작품들을 많이 번역 출판한 그 출판사니까 만나보라고 주선을 해줘서 그 출판사 관계자랑 만나보고 이제 번역 출판이 시작됐죠. 2001년도에 이문열 선생님의 젊은 날의 추상 처음으로 출판이 나왔어요. 그래서
2001년.
네. 그러면서 이제 그 후부터 쭉 번역을 시작해서 출판한 게 한 11권, 10권, 11권째 되는데 이문열 선생님 거 3권, 그 다음에 황석현 선생님 거 2권, 그 다음에 한강 선생님 거 2권, 한말수 선생님 거 1권, 그 다음에 단편으로 참 2019년에 이미 그 한국 문학에 대한 관심이 되게 많았어요. 그래서 2019년에 유명 그 스웨덴 문학 잡지가 있는데 1년에 3번 정도 나오는 거로 아는데 거기서 한국 특집이 있었어요. 그래서 많은 단편 같은 것들을 실었는데 저희가 그중에 배수아 작가님하고 김금희 작가님의 단편 소설도 거기에 번역해서 실었어요.
그러면은 지금 오늘 책을 번역하신 책을 가지고 나오셨는데요. 한번 보여주시면 좋을 것 같아요.
이거는 작별하지 않는다 그 스웨덴어 번역 그 스웨덴 말로 Jag tar inte farväl.
farewell.
그걸 직역하면은 나는 작별하지 않는다.
나는 작별하지 않는다.
이 제목을 정할 때도 좀 에피소드가 있는데 그 출판사 쪽에서는 뭐 impossible goodbye나 이런 뉘앙스는 어떠냐라고 했었는데 저희 생각에는 작별하지 않는다의 느낌을 그대로 살리는 게 좋아서 스웨덴어로도 작별이란 말은 조금 문학적인 그런 의미나 뉘앙스가 있거든요. 그런데 이제 문제는 한국에서는 주어가 생략되는 경우가 많잖아요. 그래서 작별하지 않는다 누가. 그래서 이제 한강 작가님하고 이걸 어떻게 제목을 정하면 좋을까 하다가 주인공, 경아, 인선, 그다음에 인선의 어머니 이게 모두가 주인공일 수 있는 거니까 그러면 나로 하자. 누구든지 내가 될 수 있으니까 아니 독자도 그렇기 때문에 나는 작별하지 않는다로 정했습니다. 그리고 이것은 한강 선생님의 흰. 이것을 번역할 때는 좀 왜냐면 스토리 라인이 너무 시적으로 절제됐기 때문에 시와 소설의 중간 정도 되는 느낌이어가지고 그 운율이라든가 아니면 언어가 여러 가지 뜻을 가진 함축적인 느낌 이런 걸 살리기 위해서 잘 해내야 되기 때문에 자칫하면 그 깔끔하고 시적인 느낌이 좀 살지 못할까봐 되게 노력했어요.
And also that's illustrated with photographs as well, to find that kind of harmony as well between the language and the photographs in the translation process. And to think a lot about that.
좀 재미없는 농담이 나와요. 짖지 않는 개는 안개. 그런데 이거를 어떻게 번역을 해야 되나? 그렇다고 뭐 barking dog is fog 이렇게 할 수는 없잖아요. 전혀 다른 의미가 되니까. 그래서 막 고민하다가 옛날 스웨덴 농담이라고 그래야 되나? 비슷한 느낌이 있어서.
So just bringing in the themes that's in the joke. So the joke comes around with the person seeing a dog and then coming up with that joke. So some joke in Swedish that has a dog that has the color of white in it, and also the kind of play of words in it. So we have to come up with our own joke. And since in the original it's not really that funny jokes, it didn't matter that the Swedish joke was also that funny. So when you hunt, the word for the dogs that run in front of the hunter to scare up the animals, that's an homonym that sounds the same as a pile of snow.
In Swedish.
In Swedish. So basically, so what that word that doesn't bark, what is that? And then just playing, well, that's the pile of snow. So then bringing in the snow, the whiteness, and the dog, and having that kind of negation in it.
Can you say that in Swedish?
Saying the joke in Swedish. Så vad är det för drev som inte skäller? Ett snödrev. That's the joke.
drev.
drev.
그래서 그렇게 번역을 했어요. 그래서 그런 거를 이제 고심하고 좀 없는 거. 어떨 때는 식물이나 이런 거 번역 중에는 식물 이름 한국에는 있지만 외국에는 없는 거, 스웨덴에 없는 거. 그런 건 또 식물에 조예가 깊은 누군가한테 좀 물어본다거나 그 여러 가지 호칭도 그렇고. 그래서 이제 그런 것들을 고민 많이 하게 되긴 하는데 내용은 사실 그다지 어렵진 않았어요. 내용을 하는 거. 이게 작별하지 않는다 같은 경우에는 제주 방언이 많이 나오잖아요.
제주 방언.
근데 그래도 대충은 이해가 되더라고요. 전체적인 뜻은. 근데 이제 한강 선생님이 그 제주 방언 그 리스트를 보내주셨었어요. 그래서 그것도 도움이 됐고.
The biggest problem was how to relate that into the Swedish translation. So it's very difficult to translate dialect like that, but it has such an important role to play in this book. So we have Kyung in the beginning talking about that kind of, what is the word that she uses, the kind of the warmth and of that language that is being used, while then talking about quite difficult things. And so we wanted to have it represented in some way in the translation, but not being as a kind of barrier that just sounds strange in Swedish translation. So we tried to find small nuances in the word choices, and just to see that this is different from the rest of the narration. And so when these people talk, it has a different quality, a different tone in it. It was not easy.
그리고 사실 한강 선생님의 이 소설을 번역하게 된 계기는 물론 저희도 번역하고 싶었어요. 한강 선생님 책을 오랫동안. 왜냐하면 저희가 처음 한강 선생님을 만났을 때가 2013년이에요. 그때는 그 번역원 주체로 문학 기행을 했었거든요. 그때 이제 그 여러 작가님들을 모시고 이제 북 토론도 하고 책 토론도 하고 했었는데 그때 한강 선생님도 오셨어요. 근데 그때 이제 이미 한강 선생님은 채식주의자로 어느 정도 한국 내에서는 인지도가 꽤 많이 있으셨던 상태였는데 그때 이제 알고 선생님 책을 꼭 번역하고 싶다 하던 차에 그동안 다른 번역해야 할 책들이 있어서 그거 어느 정도 끝나고 있던 차에 이 스웨덴 출판사에서 판권을 사셨고 저희에게 사실 소년이 온다랑 채식주의자도 번역해달라고 먼저 의뢰가 왔는데 2015년에 그러니까 맨부커상 타기도 훨씬 전이에요. 근데 그때 저희가 1년에 2권을 그때 6개월에 2권을 해달라고 그랬나? 그래서 저희는 불가능하기 때문에 그때는 못할 것 같다 고사를 했는데 그래서 어쩔 수 없이 스웨덴 쪽에서는 그 영역본을 그때 영역본이 막 나왔을 때라 영역본을 가지고 중역을 했어요.
네.
그리고 그 다음에 이제 흰이 나왔을 때 스웨덴 출판사에서 다시 해달라고 부탁을 해서 흰부터는 이제 저희가 할 수 있어가지고 흰하고 그 다음에 이것도 하게 됐어요.
So the reason that time why the publisher wanted to have Seunghye on that and Hyosuk translated and published so quickly was because Hangang was coming to
Yeah.
Sweden for an event and they wanted to have the books out and published before she came. So that's the time pressure.
그 노벨상 시상식에 가신다고 들었는데 그 말씀을 좀 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
So in general, the Swedish translators of the Nobel Prize in literature get the invitation to participate in both the awards ceremony, but also the banquet and other events surrounding.
그래서 무엇을 입어야 되나 그것도 좀 걱정이 되는데 한복을 입는 게 가장 좋을까 싶기도 하고. 근데 이제 사실 앞으로는 아마 한강 선생님이 노벨상을 받았기 때문에 좀 더 많은 작가에 대한 관심이 더 있을 거예요. 근데 사실은 한 10여 년 전부터 이미 스웨덴 출판사에서 한국 문학에 대한 관심이 정말 많이 달라졌어요. 그래서 그때 사실 황석영 선생님의 오래된 정원하고 한시 연대기를 번역했었는데 그때 이미 그 스웨덴 출판사에서 이거를 번역해달라고 요청을 해온 거예요. 그러니까 그전에는 저희가 들고 가서 이제 출판사에서 부탁을 했는데 그때부터는 이미 그 출판사에서 그때 스웨덴에서 가장 큰 출판사였거든요. 보니에시라고. 그래서 그쪽에서 먼저 연락을 해서 번역을 해달라 이렇게 하게 됐고요. 그러니까 초창기에는 번역원의 그 지원을 많이 받았죠. 출판도 그렇고.
네.
근데 그 후 한 10여 년 전부터는 출판사 자체에서 감당할 수 있게 그렇게 그 분위기가 바뀌었어요. 환경이. 그리고 그때부터 이미 그 한국 원본을 원작의 글을 저에게 보내서 예를 들면 정유정 작가님, 그 다음에 편혜영 작가님, 그 다음에 최근에는 강지영 작가의 10년 사는 킬러라는 작품을 판권을 샀는데 그걸 언제쯤 번역해 줄 수 있는지 물어봤었거든요. 그리고 지금 번역한 이 출판사의 그 출판 담당 선생님이 그 공방의 계절이라는 연소민 작가의 그 작품을 보내주고 내용을 좀 그 요약해서 보내달라고 하더라고요. 요즘은 그래서 이제 스웨덴 출판사에서 직접 한국 그 문학계의 동향 그런 거 어느 정도 아는 것 같아요. 아니면은 프랑크푸르트 박람회나 이런 데 가가지고 직접 그러니까 그 판권을 사기 위해서 직접 그 원본을 가지고 이제 접촉하는 일들이 되게 많아요.
So Swedish publisher, they keep a keen eye on what's going on. So when we get these kind of requests to look at, oh, we've heard that a lot of foreign publishers buy the rights for this book. So they want to be one of the first Swedish publishers to get the rights for those books. So that's why they also have to look at it and have a look.
그래서 이미 노벨상을 받기 전부터 한 10여 년부터 그런 추세가 있었어요. 그래서 그러니까 그동안 사실 출판으로 치자면 24년 정도 됐는데 이게 토양이 점점 쌓아온 것 같아요. 그러니까 갑자기 이렇게 됐다기보다는 여러 한국 작가들의 책들이 읽혀지고 처음에는 좀 마니아층만 읽히다가 지금은 그 저변이 확대되고 그러면서 출판사들도 다양한 한국 작가들 그다음에 신진 작가들이나 한국에서 주목받는 작가들에 대한 관심이 더 많아지고 그러면서 한강 작가가 이제 중간에 맨부커상도 받고 그 맨부커상 이전에도 벌써 프랑스나 다른 유럽 지역에서 많이 그 번역이 돼서 출판됐거든요. 그런 것들이 다 합쳐져서 아마 이번에 한강 선생님이 노벨상의 토대가 되지 않았을까. 그리고 그 신문 기사, 서평 기사 실렸을 때 제가 제일 감명 깊게 생각했던 그 타이틀 중에 하나는 번역 문학이 없었다면 이 세상이 얼마나 좁은 상태일지 한강 작가는 잘 보여주고 있다. 이렇게 그 평을 했더라고요. 그래서 그리고 정확히 꿰뚫고 있는 것 같은 게 어떤 서평에서는 뭐 폭력, 학살, 뭐 고통, 트라우마, 절망, 아픔 이런 것을 다루고 있는 책이 주로이지만 한강 작가의 책들은 그러면서도 뭔가 우리에게 따뜻함을 전해준다라는 그런 말도 있었고 그런 것들이 정말 잘 표현되고 있는 것 같아요. 스웨덴 정서들.
너무 감사합니다. 그래서 오늘 이렇게 참 뜻깊은 시간인 것 같아요. 그래서 2024년 10월 10일 발표가
네, 12월 10일.
네, 그 저희가 한글날 다음 날 또 발표가 돼서
네.
네, 너무 기뻤고 또 이런 기쁜 소식을 지금 런던에서 그 스웨덴 할리먼이 주는 이 노벨상을 번역을 이제 흰하고 작별하지 않는다를 번역하신 두 분을 모시고 그 생생한 그 이제 소감을 함께 나눌 수 있어서 너무 뜻깊었습니다.
또 한 가지 덧붙일 거는 그 채식주의자하고 작별하지 않는다가 오디오북으로 좀 몇 주 안에 나올 거예요.
네.
그래서 일반 독자들이 사서 들을 수 있는 오디오북으로 된다고 하고 그 스웨덴에서 그 노벨 시상식 이전에 되게 중요한 행사가 하나 있어요. 그 노벨 문학상을 받은 사람의 행사. 거기에도 초대가 됐는데
So the laureate that receives the Nobel Prize in Literature has a lecture, and this is something that becomes an important part often of that authors, or often people relate back to what they said in the Nobel lecture. So that is on the 7th of December. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to come here to talk. It's always enjoyable to be able to talk into the context of the popularity of Korea and the popularity of increasingly Korean history as well. So thank you so very much for inviting me.
정말 이렇게 귀한 상을 받는 그런 순간에 함께 할 수 있어서 저희도 너무 기쁘고 또 한강 선생님께 큰 박수를 보내드리고 싶어요.
그러면 여기서 우리가 한강 선생님이 이 영상을 보시고 있다고 생각하면서 큰 박수를 함께
네.
보내드리면 어떨까요? 네, 그래서 오늘 이렇게 그 생생한 어떻게 보면 한국의 역사가 바로 문학을 통해서 또 이루어지고 문학을 통해서 또 한국 역사를 우리가 또 공부하게 되고 그 풍성함을 함께 할 수 있었습니다. 주 영국 대한민국 대사관 그리고 주 영국 문화원이 코리안 컬처 나우를 주제로 이제 대담 시리즈를 시작한 한국 역사 그리고 또 한강 노벨상을 받은 그 특별한 대담 순서였습니다. 수아스의 칼손 교수님 그리고 번역가 박옥경 선생님 정말 오늘 함께 해주셔서 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.